Welcome to Design Your Life in Business, the podcast for leaders by Bright Mind Consulting Group. We give you the necessary tools to help you become the architect of not just your business, but your life too. I'm your host, Jevon Wooden. Hey, Delita, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to have you on Design Your Life in Business, the podcast for leaders. Audience, I just want you to know that this is a very special episode, and I probably say that a lot, but I really mean it. The person we're speaking to today, I came across her art through actually Cedric, who's her husband, who we're in the same doctoral program, and I was in awe. I'm telling you, you will see some. We'll post some on the site. We'll post some links to it, but you get a treat. You're going to talk to someone who really eats, sleeps, and breathes artfully living. And she's going to tell you a little bit more about what that means. So, Delita, without me talking too much more, go ahead and tell us who you are.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here today and tell you a little bit more about myself and the things that I do in the studio. So, my name is Delita Martin. I am a mixed media printmaking artist. I dabble in a lot of different mediums, mainly printmaking, but I also bring drawing, painting, hand stitching, all those sorts of things into my work as well. And now I am on a new journey of bringing art into the everyday life of everyday people.
I love that. So with that said, first we have to talk about how you even got started on this art journey.
Wow. Well, I was literally 5 years old, and my father's was an artist, and I have grown up among artists, so to speak, quilters, writers in my family. So art was just kind of like an everyday thing. So I always tell people I grew up in an art school. And so my love for art goes all the way back to then. And it was just something I always knew that I was going to be an artist. And it was just a matter of how that was going to manifest. And so I pursued art all my life, majored in art at Texas Southern University. And even though I had quote unquote a day job, I still pursued my art until I was able to realize that dream fully. So now I'm a full-time artist in my studio, Black Box Press.
Yeah. And we know like there's a term, starving artist, right?
Yes, indeed.
When you were able to kind of make this, like you said, you're a full-time artist. How did you not just survive in this art space, but you're actually thriving?
I think it's partially staying focused, but I always tell people it is possible to have a thriving career in the arts. It's a lot of work. Do not get me wrong. I think a lot of people look at artists and they think, oh, you just wake up and you just do the thing. Well, that's not totally true. Being an artist is a constant hustle. You're wearing a business hat, but you're also wearing a creative hat, and you're trying to figure this thing out. So I think that unfortunately, we don't have one of those careers where you just kind of wake up and it's like, I go to school, I graduate, I do an internship. My first position will be in the mailroom. From there, I'll go to this position. We don't have that. But it's also a blessing because we're able to take our careers and make it what we want it to be. And I think I worked really hard, and it was challenging, but it was well worth it.
Absolutely. I mean, clearly you're well cited. Your works have been in tons of museums. I believe it was even in a movie, The Portrait, right?
I think, was it the photograph?
The photograph. Yes, I knew it was something like that.
The photograph.
Yes,
Yeah.
the photograph with Issa Rae. That blows my mind because you were just talking about that. And a lot of artists that I run into, they're living literally like work by work, right? So they may sell a work for $5,000, but then it's crickets for months. So how did you build it where you are well known, you're seen in all these things, you have art in movies, mainstream movies, not just a movie, right? Not a B, C type screen. How did you do that?
So again, I'm in the studio every day. My day starts between 5:30 and 6 a.m. And I taught for a while at the University of Arkansas in Little Rock. And I used to always tell my students, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And so it's really important to continue to produce work. You have to be in the studio. You have to be producing. You also have to be connecting with the art world. So going to exhibitions, making relationships and building relationships with curators and arts administrators, all of those things are extremely important. But the most important thing of all of that is have the work. You have to do the work. They don't want to know what you can do. They want to see what you have done and what you are doing. So that's very important to stay in the studio and continue to work.
And you have a very distinct style. How did you find that?
Wow. So it's a style that has evolved since I was a young kid. I had my first critique by Dr. John T. Biggers, who actually founded the art department at Texas Southern University. My father studied under him, and he introduced me to him at a very young age. And one of the things that really stood out to me during that meeting with him, other than being this 12-year-old kid who is seeing this art star and wondering, oh my gosh, who can I tell that would really understand how important this moment is? But he told me, he's like, young lady, do not ever miss an opportunity to uplift your people in your work. And that has stuck with me forever. I mean, when I walk into my studio doors, that is clearly what's on my mind is how do I elevate and uplift my community through my work? And in doing so, my style has developed and evolved over time. I fell in love with drawing. That was my first love. And from there, I moved on to printmaking. So it's about the exploration of medium in ways to express yourself. And so I never want to be the artist who has this monolithic practice. I want to be able to evolve and move into all different spaces, all different creative spaces.
To be honest, I walked into your studio and I was in awe. I said that earlier. I mean, I had never seen art like that. And just to be able to be amongst it and get to see some of your process, for me, it just made me feel in a way that I hadn't felt just looking at art because I'm a person that appreciates it,
Appreciate that.
but I don't really know what the heck I'm looking at, right? But yours is
But you engaging with the work as an artist, I always feel like it's my responsibility to put the conversation out there. And when someone can walk up to the work and it resonates with them in some sort of way, the conversation has started and my job is done.
yes, well, you do your job very well. And you have this concept, which I hadn't heard before, the veil scape. Can
Yes.
you tell us a little bit more about that concept of the veil scape?
Yeah. So I grew up with my grandmother. Everyone in my household was creative, but there was always a spiritual aspect to that. So not only in my home, being with my grandmother, who was a very spiritual individual who taught us how to read dreams, how to connect with the spiritual side of who we were, moving on to undergraduate school. The school I studied art was very much the same way. I was taught that you have to have a personal and spiritual connection to your work. And from there, the technical will follow. You will become technical proficient once that connection has been made. And so, again, following that path, I started to look at my work and I realized that my responsibility as an artist is to make the unseen seen and the intangible tangible. And so when I looked at my work, I realized that I was talking about, at its very core, identity, but the spiritual identity of women of color, and particularly Black women, and how we become our spiritual other. And so I asked the question, how can I show this to the viewer? And it became texture, it became color, it became pattern. And all those things to me mimic life. There are areas when the work marries together very beautifully, and there are other areas where you see this visual tension that happens. And that's very much like what happens. And so that was a way of me being able to show how the spiritual identity, how the spiritual space, and that's exactly what the veilscape is. It's that space between the waking world and the spirit world in which we exist at all times.
Beautifully said, by the way. And for some reason, it reminds me of W.E.B. Du Bois talking about the souls of Black folks. You mentioned
Yes,
the women. And the reason why is because he talks about how there's like two different cells, maybe even three, depending on who you are. And you kind of have to, we call it code switching these days, right? Where you're
absolutely.
working, right? So it just reminds me of that. And I'm just wondering, like, for the listeners, I just have to ask them a question. Have you ever tapped into that bellscape that Delita is talking about, because it's really finding your true self when you allow yourself to discover that space, that spiritual space and the waking space. I think that that is very profound to think about.
When people ask me about the space, I always liken it to walking into a room and you get this funny feeling or you get an emotion that was, for all intents and purposes, unevoked. But you get this feeling, it's that fingerprint. That's the space that I'm talking about, that space that you can't quite touch, but it's there. Children exist in that space all the time. It's only when we as adults start to tell them, oh, no, that's imaginary. That's make believe. That's not real. When in fact it is. But children transition in out of that space seamlessly and they recognize it. It's just us as adults that do not until we take the time and open ourselves to be able to connect in a way that allows us to feel, to hear, to see in that space.
It's a practice, right?
It is.
It really makes me think about mindfulness and meditation and really just being, because that's the only way we can get
Absolutely.
there.
Absolutely. That's my daily practice is, I come into the studio between 5:30 and 6. I initially make a pot of tea. I go sit on my porch and I watch the sunrise. And that's a way of me to allow myself to calm, to open myself up to receive what needs to be received in the studio.
Absolutely. You mentioned tea, so you know where I'm going.
I know
Dima
you will.
Designs and Dima Tea. Can you tell
Yep.
us a little bit more about? I mentioned Artfully Living, and this is a part of that Artfully Living movement that you are creating. So tell us a little bit more about how you got into crafting teas.
So I love art. I love everything about it. I love every medium there is. I'm always trying to learn more and to experience more in that space. And so with that being said, I became curious as to what can I do and how can I affect the way that we live with art beyond the museum walls, beyond the institutions, beyond the galleries? How can we live with art every single day in work, in play, in home? How do we do that? And so it started off with mugs. I have a mug collection. If anybody follows me on social media, you'll see my hashtag morning mug shots.
So you have one over there. I see you with it before we started this. Go ahead and flash that for the YouTubers. So,
Yes, there you go. So this is one of my works, but I wanted people to be able to wake up and experience art and love it and fall in love with it as much as I do. And so because I'm drinking tea, people quite often ask me what I drink, and I'm like, the majority of the time it's tea. And so I was like, what if I had a tea blend? What if I could share with people who love my work, who follow me, and just people who are my friends and family? What if I can share with them my love for tea as well? And so few years working on the project or gathering information. And the first initial part of it was actually me documenting the experiences in which I wanted to share, because each blend of tea is inspired by my art, my encounters of art and other artists, as well as my travels in the art world. And so each tea has what I call a tea story, which talks about how each blend was inspired and thought of. And so I wrote down, I kept journaling about these places and things that I wanted to share. And then we reached out to a tea sommelier in Florida, and
that's something I
the
didn't even
journey
know.
began.
A tea sommelier.
I, I know it was part of the research. Believe me, I had no idea either, but I figured if all of this tea in the world, there had to be someone out there who I could talk to. And so we worked with the sommelier on all of the different blends and what was possible. And so I brought to the table these initial flavors and senses that I wanted to bring out in the tea. And from there, we crafted various blends.
And let me tell you firsthand, I've had the privilege of drinking two of the blends with, I know y'all have some more coming out, but absolutely, they take you somewhere. We talked about that Bellscape. I think I went there when I sipped that tea.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it was so good. The ingredients are so fresh. You can literally see like the chunks of ginger and papaya and all this, everything that's in there, you can tell. And I think that that is super important when you
Yes.
talk about, it's not one of them ground up, like those other blends out there, right?
He does.
Yeah, yeah, the dust. It's not the dust. You literally do it loose leaf or you can do it in the sachet. So it just speaks to the research that you've done and how you do everything. I've had the privilege
Yes.
of knowing you for a few months. It feels like longer, but it's been a few months. And I see the work that you put into every single thing you put out there. And even I've learned from something from that about showing up as your best self, right? You never half-ass
Yes,
anything.
absolutely.
So I'm excited to see what else you have coming up. Just like
Lots of good stuff.
this is the best time to say it. Tell us, what do you have coming up?
Well, I have lots of things coming up. On the exhibition side, I have a solo exhibition that will be opening July 28th on Martha's Vineyard. First African American woman to have a solo exhibition at the Featherstone
Hold on,
there on
we
Rhode
got to
Island.
celebrate that. I mean, it's still crazy that we're saying the first African American woman on anything in 2024, but that is amazing. That is so dope.
Indeed.
Opening so many doors for
Indeed.
other people.
I'm so excited about this exhibition and what it's going to do for other artists and future artists that come after me. So I'm really, really proud of this moment.
Yeah, how do you should be.
So on the Dima design side, we have more tea that is coming out very soon. But we also have an apparel side to Dima Design where I want to invite the viewer to become part of the muse. Their story and how they exist in the veilscape in the world is just as important. And so I want them to be able to do that. So I have created scarves that feature artwork. They are called veilscape scarves and they feature the veilscape. And so we will be coming out with new scarves as well. And right now we currently have one that's available called the Azul scarf, veilscape scarf. And it's very beautiful. It's 100% silk. It's made in Italy. It has a hand rolled and hand stitched hem all the way around. So it was very important to me that everyone received the best of the best. I wholeheartedly believe in that.
Yeah, and one of the keys to this, I know a lot of folks who listening, like that probably costs an arm and a leg, but one of the things you wanted to do with Dima Designs was make it as accessible, right? So
Yes.
tell us more about why that was important to you.
I wanted it to be more accessible because I think about I have gone into these high-end stores and I just couldn't afford these beautiful things or what people deem as beautiful high-end quality. So I wanted to be able to share that with everyone. I want to reach across every line and every boundary that I can to pull people into this amazing space that I love so much and I know that they will love as well. And that's really important to me.
Absolutely. The reason why I asked that is because if you see, I mentioned the tees, but also the scarf. You mentioned how it was created. It's from Italy. I mean, for me, it feels something you would get from one of those high end stores, but yet the price point is much lower than that. So I'm like, when I first see being a business guy, being a business coach, I was like, man, you're selling this for what? But that was one of the things when we started working together was you said, no, I want this to stay accessible. I want people to be able to afford
Yeah.
luxury and experience that in their own way.
Because they deserve luxury. I mean, we work really hard in our everyday life. We do all of the things. You deserve luxury. You deserve to be cared for. You deserve to care for yourself. So it's really in part about self-care as much as it is about any being able to learn about art, being able to experience art in that way, being able to be the muse and enjoying tea that was created and crafted with love and care and all of these things. I think that each person that encounters Dina Designs deserves that.
Absolutely. And that kind of lends to one of your core values, which is community. And
Yes.
you are bringing this to the people, right? So you have these tea parties you do, and you have so many ideas about creating like art communities, art spaces. But you said this isn't just for art, right? The artists, this is for
No,
everyone, for all. So
it's
tell
for
us more about
everyone.
that and how community kind of blends into everything you do with your brands.
Yeah. People ask me first and foremost, what inspires you to do your work? My community. Everyone around me inspires me. I am always working. I'm out in public. I'm watching the women, I'm watching the children, I'm watching the men, I'm watching how they live and how they exist in spaces. So my community inspires me. So, of course, everything that I do, going back to what Dr. Biggers told me, never miss an opportunity to uplift your people in your work. That's exactly what it's about. It's about community. And so I remember being a young artist walking into these big museums and feeling this small and being shy and thinking, I don't know enough about art. I don't want people to feel that. I want people to feel beautiful. I want them to feel like they love art, like art can be a part of their everyday life. And so that's what this brand is about. Is about that very thing, is bringing art to the people in a way that it's quality, it's beautiful, and most of all, it's accessible.
Yeah, and I'm sure like we all aspire for that when we set out to do it, but we don't all do it. So tell us a little bit more about some of the challenges you faced along the way of making it accessible and for community. Because I know you had to have some things you're like,
Exactly. So I think, first of all, it was the challenge of figuring out how I would do this. I was asked at one point in time, what do you want your legacy to be during an art talk? And I was like, whoa, that's a heavy conversation. And I think for the most part, I made something up until I got back to the studio and I was able to really think about it. And I was like, I want to be for other people and other artists what artists and people have done to inspire me. So I had to figure out what that looked like for me. And for me, it was taking art and making it accessible to the average everyday person. And so I started thinking about the teas, I started thinking about the mugs, and I started thinking about how can I bring this to them in a way that it's not gimmicky, in a way that it is respectful to the art and it's beautiful, but also very importantly, it's functional. So that took time to develop and decide, finding someone to work with to figure this thing out because it's not my area. I am not a tea sommelier. I have no idea how it's created, but finding people to partner with, because again, that brings it all the way back to community, like yourself, finding people who have an expertise in an area that can help me fulfill goal of mine, this mission that I'm on. So all of those things were challenging. They just took a little time and research and a lot of effort to put into making it happen.
absolutely. And you are making it happen. And I am honored to be on the journey with you. I get to see the behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
So before we get to what I call the by design segment, the people listening, I'm sure some folks are like, yeah, I wanted to do this, right? But I was afraid to
Mhm.
jump out or it was didn't feel like the right time. What would you say to them about just going ahead and following their purpose, their passion?
It's very important to do that. Everything that you do is a part of your story and a part of who you are. And it's just as important as the person down the street or that high end brand that's wherever or whatever it is, your story is just as important and it needs to be pursued. It needs to come to life. Don't let time discourage you. This was not something that I created overnight. This was years in the making. When you're ready, set goals. When you're ready, it will happen and it can happen. The only thing that will stop your dream from coming true is you and the energy and time that you put into it. Those are the only two things.
That's a bar right there. Because it does take a lot of energy, right? Whatever you thought
Yes.
it was going to take, times that
It
by.
takes twice as much.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, thank
Exactly.
you for that insight. We're going to shift to the by design segment where I ask every guest the same three questions. Are you ready?
All right. I'm ready.
Let's do it. Let's do it. The first question is, what has been the hardest part about designing a life and business you don't need a vacation from?
Wow. Figuring out how to make it work and still be in love with it. I think it took me about a year to figure out. I mean, at this point, I was getting up every day at 8 o'clock and I was showing up for someone else's dream. And that was great. That was wonderful. But I had to figure out how to show up for myself. And that was very challenging because, again, there was no set path. There was no instructions on how to do it. So it took me about a year, maybe a year and a half to figure out what that looked like. And I had to change models along the way several times. I had to figure out how to be the creative, but I was a one woman show at the time. I had to figure out how to be the creative, how to be the financial person, how to be human resources, how to go out and scout for opportunities. So I had to figure out how to make all of those things work together. And I was the only person doing it. So that was it.
Yeah, that's so real. And that resonates with me so deeply.
Exactly.
Man, all right. The second question is, what is the best lesson you've learned along your journey so far?
Wow. Never give up and always bet on yourself.
That's it. Bet on you. That's the best bet you can make.
Bet on yourself.
Absolutely. The third question is, what are 3 tools or tips you would recommend when designing a life or business?
Stay the course. That's number one. Make sure it's something that you want to do, not something that someone else wants to do. You don't need anybody else's approval. You need your approval, because once you have your approval, you're going to conquer the first thing. You're going to stay the course anyway. And then lastly, I would say put everything you have into it.
And you have a lot more in you than you think you do. So
Than you think you do.
it's uncomfortable. Don't give up on
Think-
that first. That adversity is
Nope.
that's just
I always tell people, go back to the drawing board. I mean, Cedric and I laugh all the time. We've gone on some ventures that didn't quite work out. And we laugh and we go back to the drawing board and we redo the plan, but we don't give up.
Absolutely. This life and business is iterative, right?
Yes.
No, I love that. Well, it's been such a pleasure, Delita, having you on. It's been a fun conversation. How can the people connect with you?
Well, you can reach out to me via social media. I am at Dima Design on Instagram, Black Box Press Studio also on Instagram, and Facebook. I am Delita Pinchback Martin.
I love it. Oh, and schedule of your events, is that posted somewhere so everyone can know what's next?
It will be soon.
Hey, I love it. I love it.
It will be soon.
When it is, that we'll post it on this episode in the show notes. Appreciate you once again. You've dropped a lot of gems. Make sure y'all go back and listen a time or 5 and share and subscribe, rate and review. Remember to keep ascending. And from Delita's words, bet on yourself. We'll see you soon. Design Your Life in Business, the podcast for leaders, is brought to you by Bright Mind Consulting Group. To find out more about Bright Mind Consulting Group and how you can become the best leader possible, visit brightmindconsultinggroup.com. Make sure you search for Design Your Life in Business on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Bright Mind Consulting Group, we cannot thank you enough for listening.